Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery writer-director Rian Johnson took the second Benoit Blanc film to Greece with a new cast and a fresh murder for Daniel Craig's detective to solve. A good mystery often begins with a clue that's right out in the open, even if no one recognizes it at first. In a similar way, the extravagant Greek villa that serves as the principal setting for Glass Onion. A Knives Out mystery impressed production designer Rick Heinrichs when he first visited it early in his location search. But it wasn't immediately selected for the movie's game of murder that turns deadly. It was a place that had a modernist take on classical architecture and had a hierarchy of stairs that led up to it, and I could see us placing a dome on top of it, Heinrichs tells THR. But our experience always tells us that the first place is never the one you end up with. Instead, he conducted a worldwide search and looked at everything. And it was only then that we fully appreciated the villa we had found, with its sweeping view of the Aegean Sea. The Aman Resorts Villa 20 in Greece's Porto Heli not only looked as if it could double as the lavish island estate of Edward Norton's new money billionaire Miles Bron. It also guaranteed that Glass Onion would have an expansively different look than writer-director Rian Johnson's first Knives Out mystery, set in an old-money Massachusetts manse. When the first Knives Out, produced by MRC on a modest $40 million budget and distributed by Lionsgate, proved an unexpected hit, grossing $313 million worldwide following its November 2019 release. A sequel became inevitable. Johnson tells THR, "Even when we were making the first movie, I was thinking, if this does well, it would be fun to keep making them, but always in the way that Agatha Christie did her books. Continuously challenging her detectives Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot to unravel the usually fatal relationships among a new cast of suspicious characters." Johnson says Glass Onion isn't strictly speaking a sequel but instead is a new Benoit Blanc mystery. Blanc being the southern accented sleuth created by Johnson and played with sly wit by Daniel Craig. That led to some creative choices, Johnson continues. The setting was a way of showing the audience very clearly we were going to be in a whole new deal with this one. Trading in the browns of New England for the blues and yellows of Greece. For his part, Craig was more than game, telling THR, "The success of the first one took us all by surprise. And no one dared to believe we could make another, so it was just a thrilling prospect. Even as Lionsgate signaled it was ready to greenlight a follow-up, in March 2021 Netflix swooped in, winning an auction with a whopping $469 million offer for 2 more Knives Out movies. So, Johnson got to work. He says the first 80 or 90% of his writing process involves outlining, which proves particularly useful in whodunits, where every loose end needs to be tied up and every clue has to be dropped in plain sight. Working in moleskin notebooks, he drew arcs so that he could sprinkle in clues along the way. He decided on the idea of a murder mystery on vacation, inspired by Poirot outings like Death on the Nile and Evil Under the Sun. "I thought it'd be nice to have an island because then you can isolate everyone together. And who would have a private island? Oh, maybe it's a tech billionaire. And then, what if that tech billionaire, like James Coburn's movie producer in 1973's The Last of Sheila, invites all of his friends for a murder mystery game?" Quickly, the game was afoot. Johnson chose Glass Onion for a title since it refers both to the translucent dome atop Bronze Villa and the name of a bar where the billionaire and his chums once hung out, while also providing a metaphor for the many layers of mystery to be peeled away. And even though the musical rights were expensive, he also acknowledged a debt to the Beatles' tune, Glass Onion, which plays over the closing credits. To add that Glass Onion, atop the Villa 20 without harming the resort's architectural integrity, AR and VFX was employed to augment the exterior shots. But for the interior of the dome, Heinrich's team built a set on a soundstage in Belgrade, Serbia. Originally, The plan had been to shoot interiors in London, but with so many films rushing into production post-COVID, the London studios already were booked. We thought we would shoot in London for something like this because we were going to be really dependent on a lot of resources available to us there, Heinrichs explains. The glass unit was built in London, and it was engineered and constructed and fully set up on stage not too far from Pinewood. Then they took it apart, put it in a truck and sent all the wood elements that represented glass panes off to a glass company in Germany, where they were separately cut up and sent to Belgrade, where it was all reassembled. Meanwhile, the cast was gathering to begin filming exteriors in Greece. In addition to Craig and Norton, the star-studded lineup includes Kate Hudson, Janelle Monáe, Kathryn Hahn, Dave Bautista, Leslie Odom Jr., Madeline Klein and Jessica Henwick. Most of the cast is introduced during the solving of an intricate puzzle box in the opening sequence, which Johnson concocted with props master Chris Peck. But haying so many principal characters proved to be challenging on many fronts, from filming to editing. Costume designer Jenny Egan, who worked on the first Knives Out, says everything was bigger and broader the second time around. Since the characters converge in Greece in all manner of colorful resort wear and, unlike the first film's family, none of the characters are related to one another. For Hudson's Birdie, a flamboyant influencer, it was about her outrageous personality, says Egan. We wanted to make it bold and ridiculous. The hats and, of course, there's a little bit of her mom from Overboard in there. Again, with a nod to Evil Under the Sun, these are very high-class, over-the-top people. And that's where I thought with Birdie we could definitely make that character. Adds Hudson, any character that is over the top and gets to wear hats and has the fabulous costumes is so much fun to play as an actor. It's a throwback to old movies and old Hollywood but still modern, and that's something that Rian was able to do in the whodunit genre. You just don't read characters like that very often, that truly pop off the page and then are supported by such a nuanced writer. She's not like a one-note flamboyant character, she is layered and has purpose and motivation and all of the things that you need to give to characters for a good whodunit. For Craig's Blanc, Egan carried through some design elements from the first film, like the bold and colorful neckties. There's also some silliness to Benoit that we wanted to keep there, adds Egan. In the case of Monáe, who plays both Andy, Bron's estranged partner, and Andy's twin sister Helen, costuming was especially critical. Egan and her team began by outfitting Andy because, Egan says, it would serve as a base for Helen's character. For Andy, Egan used circular shapes and straight lines that were very determined and bold with strong colors. The most difficult costume to nail down was the suit Monáe wears in the final sequences. Given the amount of action required of Monáe in those to ensure the actress' scenes was both safe and comfortable. Monáe says she felt like she was playing three characters, Andy, Helen and Helen as Andy, and so she kept 3 different notebooks to manage the energies. She says, the first 2 weeks, we stayed a lot more on Helen pretending to be Andy because we were in Greece. It was the most fun and challenging thing I've done to date, in the best possible way. I'm thankful for all the films I've done, from Moonlight to Hidden Figures to a show like Homecoming. When I look back, honestly, it was really setting me up for this role. I can see that I've used everything I've learned for this sort of role. Once all the characters meet up in the film, after lounging by the pool and strolling in the surrounding gardens, they converge in the central atrium of Bron's home that Heinrichs designed as a mix of clashing styles, with dozens of glass sculptures and even Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, which Bron has secreted out of the Louvre. He's someone who needs to impress and show off, and this is how he exerts power, Heinrichs says of the way the set helped to delineate Bron's commanding character. The dining area is almost like a Greek pavilion. I've been to the Met in New York, and they have these little temples that have been extracted from archaeological sites, so I thought that makes sense for this character. Adds Johnson, that space was crazy because when you actually walked onto the set, it was so ugly, it assaulted your eyes because it's all these things that don't fit. You have a faux classic Greek ruin on one end and then this weird Death Star-like floor with all these plinths with the glass, and then you have this weird 70s-like orgy pit with a red couch. It's like an interior designer threw up on it. But when you film it through a camera, you start separating the sections out and it looks gorgeous in a weird way that doesn't make sense. Johnson decided to include the Mona Lisa, actually copied from photos of the original by scenic painter James Gemmell, because it was a sacred cow and was something the audience could really be appropriately in awe of. She's always watching, also the ambiguity of her smile. There are a lot of things where, thematically, it made a lot of sense to put that front and center. Juggling so many characters in the same space was the most challenging thing, the director says, especially when you start dealing with that sequence in the atrium, where it's very specific in terms of what you want the audience to notice and not notice, and you're planting clues, hopefully in subtle ways but that are also in plain sight. There's a lot of math going on. Film editor Bob Duxey was charged with not only making sure every principal character had ample screen time but also that enough tension was built into the scenes leading up to the grand reveal. At the same time, he had to edit the film in such a way that the audience wouldn't feel manipulated when the case was solved, he says, so clues had to be in plain sight without being too obvious. Further complicating matters was the fact that the main set contained so much reflective glass. But cinematographer Steve Yedlin, who worked with Johnson on Looper, Star Wars The Last Jedi and the first Knives Out, says rather than try to avoid reflections, his team embraced them. We said, let's make sure there are reflections. We didn't want to just get rid of reflections, because that would be the same as not having any glass, like a 1940s movie where the glass door just didn't have any glass. We wanted to see the glass. Glass is in the title of the movie. So, number one was making sure that we had good reflections. The film's big finale, involving extensive VFX work, required extra careful planning since not only does it involve Blanc solving the central mystery, but the reveal leads to wholesale destruction, with most of the principal cast joining in. There were only 2 sets of glass sculptures on hand, so it was all about practice, says Johnson. We only had 2 takes of the actual smashing of the glass sculpture. We had been tiptoeing around these delicate glass structures the whole shoot. All the actors were so ready to start smashing them up. They were actually calling dibs on which ones they wanted to smash. It was just prep and you have a lot of meetings and a lot of diagramming it out. Adds Monor, I loved breaking the glass. It was cathartic. I was ready. Heinrichs notes that while they were preparing the sets in Serbia for the finale, a prop warehouse burned down as they were trying to figure out how to make all the glass sculptures for inside the atrium. We had to make 2 or 3 out of everything, but the heat of the glass would destroy the molds, so we made them out of resin. But our whole resin operation got shut down by the fire. Instead, they sent everything up to glass factories in Prague. Of course, the grand finale also includes the burning of the Mona Lisa. Johnson says that Craig was a little bit nervous about destroying the most famous painting in the world, even if it was fiction. He was like, are people going to turn on us when we burn down the Mona Lisa, says Johnson. It's almost more famous for being famous than it is for being a work of art people have a deep connection to, and I think it's so much of a sacred cow that people get the joke. Netflix granted the finished film a 1-week run in about 600 theaters, including the 3 major chains, AMC, Regal and Cinemark, on November 23. In advance of Glass Onion debuting on the streaming service December 23. And while Johnson would still like to see more theatrical dates for the film, he defends his and producer Ram Bergman's decision to go with Netflix. Between the release of the 2 Knives Out films, COVID had upended the exhibition business and streamers had rewritten distribution models. Says Johnson, the world had changed since we put the first movie out. It's not like it was a choice between Netflix and the theatrical experience. The theatrical experience of Knives Out didn't exist anymore. The reality was, if we had sold the movie to another studio, the great likelihood is they would turn around and flip it to a streamer, so it would be day and date regardless. Netflix was the right choice to go with. Offers Bergman, we were already in pre-production on the second, and we were still in the midst of the pandemic and had no idea what the world would look like. Today, I still don't know what the world looks like. The guys at Netflix made the most aggressive offer. And you could see they believed in it. Even though box office analysts charged that Netflix left money on the table by limiting Glass Onion's theatrical run, Bergman says of the experiment. I hope it's the first step toward doing this with more movies and figuring out how to calibrate a new way of releasing movies. We can see what's going on in the theaters, and it's not pretty. Maybe there is a different model and maybe you can show the world, whether it's the streamers or the studios or the exhibitors, that those things can coexist. For his part, Johnson has already started thinking about the third Knives Out mystery. I've very vaguely started clustering ideas together. I'm really excited about the challenge of figuring out something that's thrillingly different from both of them. And that feels scary but still gives the pleasures of a fun murder mystery. Johnson adds that the franchise has a creative hold on him at the moment. I thought that I was going to do something completely different before I did the next Benoit Blanc mystery, but every time I start thinking about other stuff, my brain just comes back to this. It's the most exciting thing in the world to me. I feel like it's an endlessly malleable genre and I would be absolutely thrilled to come back every couple of years and do another one of these for as long as we can. Echoes Craig, as long as we can keep entertaining people, we will keep making them. Rian Johnson is jet-lagged. In fact, there's a chance that when Rian Johnson sits down in London to talk with Empire about Glass Onion and Knives Out mystery, that he may not actually be in the room. I'm not even here. I'm like Luke in The Last Jedi, he says, neatly referencing his own movie. I'm back in my cave. Force projection aside, the reason why Johnson is so tired is that he's been hither and thither promoting the heck out of Glass Onion, the second installment in his series of mystery movies featuring Daniel Craig as the indefatigable detective Benoit Blanc. Unusually for a big Netflix release, the film had a major theatrical run, albeit for just a week, during which it was clear that this was a meticulously constructed crowd-pleaser that will largely live its life without a crowd to please. But it's also, like The Last Jedi, a sequel that rips up the rulebook, swapping gloom for sunshine, Boston for Greece, a straight-up murder mystery for something more labyrinthine involving deception, internet dudes adultery, the Mona Lisa, and more. Here, with some spoilers lurking within, Johnson talks about all these things. So, where do you start with breaking a movie as intricate as Glass Onion? How do you come up with crimes so precise and ingenious that the entire movie can be built around them? I start structurally. I start working in notebooks. I don't start with the crime, I start with the structure of the story, and what the audience's journey is actually going to be through the story. Which has to do with the crime, but more than that, it has to do with who we care about and why. In the first movie, the mechanics of the murder I had to come up with as a secondary process. The first thing was figuring out the broad strokes. You have a protagonist who you reveal early on actually did the crime, and yet the audience remains sympathetic to the protagonist. And then we're worried that the detective is going to catch the protagonist, and you reveal at the end that there's actually a murder mystery lurking under this the whole time. That's great, as opposed to, let's come up with a great murder, where you'll drive yourself insane trying to do it. In Glass Onion, Janelle Monáe serves A different function to Ana de Armas in the first movie, as she's a stealth protagonist that you're hiding in plain sight for the first half of the movie. Yeah, absolutely. With Glass Onion it was the half and half structure that was the starting point for it. Can you tell one story, do a reset at the midpoint, tell the same story from a different perspective and get away with that in a feature? That led to creating Janelle's character. I realized that to keep the audience engaged in that back half, what really needed to kick in is not just a clever, "oh, we're seeing it from this angle." What would need to kick in was empathy. What needed to kick in was a true protagonist, who was going to emotionally involve the audience, who we were going to care about getting through to the end of this thing. Like in the first movie, she's a woman who has been overlooked, downtrodden, treated horrendously, not just her, but her sister, of course, and Benoit Blanc is drawn to her plight. Were you drawn to the parallels between de Armas Marta and Helen Andy? Weirdly, not really. I mean, it's true, but those parallels come more as a result of wanting to create a sympathetic protagonist for the audience. That means creating an underdog. That means creating someone who, in contrast to the rest of the suspects, we want to see win at the end. It wasn't necessarily leaning into, these movies are about female protagonists or this type or that type. I'll probably do something completely different next time, now that you're onto me. You do something completely different for this one. You switch it. It's a very different movie, tonally, visually, stylistically. That's also something you did with The Last Jedi. Is that how you approach sequels? With Glass Onion, there was an element of that. I wanted to cue the audience that we were in for a totally different ride. The Last Jedi, not at all, that wasn't on my mind at all. It's just my method of storytelling and trying to engage and give the audience a great story, which to me means having them be surprised and delighted and terrified, and all the things you want. I did those things in the way that I do them. For this, I did want to make sure that the audience knew that if we keep making these things, every single one of them is going to be like a new Agatha Christie book. It's going to be an entirely different ball of wax. The third movie will be completely different from the second movie. One scene that I'm guessing tickled you immensely while writing it is Duke's death. There's so much going on. You've got the Mona Lisa security frame going off every 5 seconds, you have this sense of dread, that something bad is about to happen. From a writing standpoint, it was just kind of trying to funnel the scene into this unexpected moment of horror. On set, we blocked it out and I didn't really understand the tension that was going to be there for an audience until we got it together in the edit and started showing it to people. In the first several cuts, it did not have the little pops to the Mona Lisa, and a friend of mine, Mike Lerman, watched it and said, "The tension in that scene reminded me of the firecracker scene in Boogie Nights." That's exactly what I was going to say. So I thought, oh, might as well lean into that. And we went back in the editing and we stole these little shots we had of the Mona Lisa. And I cut them in with really harsh sound effects to be basically the equivalent of the firecrackers, and to see if we could build that up even more. It's never too late in the process to be thinking of solutions. Why is the title Glass Onion a Knives Out mystery, and not Glass Onion a Benoit Blanc mystery? The title is just Glass Onion for me. We had to stick a Knives Out mystery on there. I was all for it because I wanted everyone who enjoyed Knives Out to know that this was the next one. But honestly, I'm a bit annoyed that we had to do it. It's a bit like saying, Death on the Nile, a Murder on the Orient Express mystery. Knives Out was the first movie, Glass Onion is the second movie, the third movie will have its own title. I really like thinking of these as mystery novels. People will recognize Knives Out. Not necessarily everyone knows who Benoit Blanc is yet. So the third one will be, titled here, a Knives Out and Glass Onion mystery. I swear to God, man. By the time we get deep enough into this, it's just going to be 80 words on the screen. We're going for it. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for you. First of all, you had the movie open theatrically here and in the US, and it did gangbusters. Obviously, though, it's going to be on Netflix by the time people read this, but you now have concrete proof that you made a movie that kills with an audience. Is that a bittersweet feeling for you? It was a wave of sweetness over the week it was out, getting to see packed houses really enjoying the movie. Look, the fact that Netflix stepped out of their comfort zone and worked with the big theater chains and really promoted the movie in a way they never have. They really did step forward in a way they don't usually do when it comes to theatrical. They did it for us, because it was really important to us, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, I want more, especially seeing as we make these movies for audiences. You know, more people will discover it on streaming, and the movies that inspired me to make these, like The Old Death on the Nile or Evil Under the Sun, I discovered sitting around the TV with my family at home. So it's not like I feel it's a tragedy. But I also know how much fun it is to see these in a crowded house. I want to show that a successful theatrical release can boost it on streaming with the right movie. Those two can go hand in hand and really support each other, so that we can get even more time in more theaters next time. That's my goal, to have this be a proof of concept. Another interesting thing that's happened is what's happening with Elon Musk and Twitter. I know Miles Bron is not Elon Musk, but Glass Onion is, as Knives Out was. About the obscenity of the mega-rich and about how people can deify the mega-rich and assume that just because you're a billionaire, you're going to be some sort of God-given genius. In a way, you've been getting free marketing. I hope it's free. I hope Netflix haven't been paying for this. If they have, God bless them. I wrote this movie a few years ago, and it was inspired by a whole different crop of tech geniuses who revealed themselves to be less than that a few years ago. It's been wild, the news over the past few months. But both Glass Onion and Knives Out are fueled by this righteous anger. For me, it's never the idea of just shitting on the rich. With Knives Out, it's about the family, and it's basically what the invasion of Trump into American politics did to the dynamics of a lot of personal relationships and family. With this one, the notion of making fun of some tech dude is kind of easy, and can be funny. But what's actually interesting is the idea of the place that these people hold in society and the idea of all our culpability in this weird relationship we have with them. With wanting to shit on them but also kind of wanting to see them as Willy Wonka, and how big lies ended up getting protected by people who benefit from them. I guess I'm trying to find my own culpability in all of these things and my own personal skin in the game as opposed to TSK sking the rich. That is much more fertile ground, it seems like. As these movies go on, you obviously become more and more successful. Does that worry you? How do you stop yourself from becoming insulated like Miles Bron? Absolutely, there's an element of that to it. I'm in my late 40s now, and even getting deeper into my 40s, the world feels a bit more like a zombie movie, except with people turning into grumpy old men around me. It's not even about success isolating you, it's about suddenly getting grumpy and dismissing the young and pining for the old days. But the concern about getting isolated through success is a big one. Maybe part of pan-frying it in this movie is me trying to keep myself out of it. Where are you with the next one? You must have other stories you want to tell and need to tell. How do you strike that balance? I don't know. I'm making the next one next, because it's the most exciting thing right now to me. That's served me really well. I feel like any movie I'm making, I need to be making it because I can't imagine doing anything else. I'm jumping into the next Benoit Blanc next because I can't think about another story. Where are you with it? I've got a big cloud of ideas, but it hasn't all snapped into focus yet. It's exciting, though, and it's very, very different from this one. That's what I'm excited about.